Welcome everyone to a public panel, and it is my very special honor also to announce the actually very first event of the Rihla initiative here in Oman. My name is Dawit Al-Ansari. I'm the president of Majan Council, one of the two co-hosts of today's event that is hosted not only geographically but also content-wise in very close proximity to the Oman Hydrogen Week, and picking up on an exciting topic that is becoming more and more important. So eventually, during the early days of, the 2020s hydrogen hype, producers were heavily focused on exports, and no more and more, be it born out of necessity or be it born out of the economic insight that there is more to hydrogen than exports. We're looking closer at hydrogen-based green industrial development. So the question, how can hydrogen help economies in order to grow beyond merely extractive style industry, and perhaps instead contribute to the development of a new economy and new economic model. At that point, I would like to give both the word and my very dear thanks to my co-host, Mehran from the Bourse and Bazaar Foundation, who is at the same time the director of the Rihla initiative.
Good afternoon. It is a real pleasure to welcome you to this session of the Rihla Initiative panel series here in Muscat. The event is part of a broader journey that has already taken us from Abu Dhabi to Rabat, Pretoria, Bangkok, Almaty, and Doha, and it now forms an important step in the implementation phase of the Rihla Initiative. I would like to begin by expressing my sincere appreciation to Dawood Al-Ansari and the entire Majan Council team for their exceptional partnership and support in bringing this discussion together. Dawood has been a true champion of this work and an invaluable member of Rihla's Golf Committee, and we're very grateful for his leadership and hospitality here in Oman. Today's session takes place alongside the Oman Green Hydrogen Summit, happening just next door. The timing could not be more fitting. While the summit brings together global industry, investors, and policymakers, this Rihla roundtable and public panel provide a dedicated space to examine how hydrogen can drive green industrial development across the Gulf and the wider global South. It is a complementary conversation anchored in the same ambition, but focused on the policy, strategy, and cooperation frameworks needed to make that ambition real. This panel also comes at a pivotal moment for the Rihla initiative. Just 1 month ago, we convened the Rihla Policy Forum in Doha, bringing together 50 Policy Council members from 34 countries for 2 days of intensive deliberations. The forum marked a major milestone, transforming what began as a concept 1 year ago into a structured platform for policy dialogue, research collaboration, and strategic partnerships across the Gulf, the broader Middle East and North Africa, Central Asia and the Caucasus, South and Southeast Asia, and Sub-Saharan Africa. Within the forum, the Green Hydrogen Focus Group, one of the 6 established focus groups of the Rihla Initiative, played an important role in advancing the discussions. It reaffirmed the significant potential of hydrogen for diversification and decarbonization, but also made clear that many foundational questions remain unresolved, especially in regions facing acute water scarcity. The group stressed that any hydrogen strategy must begin with a careful assessment of water availability, desalination requirements, environmental impacts, and broader resource trade-offs before large-scale production is pursued. There was consensus on the need to prioritize scientific research, feasibility studies, and pilot initiatives, followed by targeted investments across the hydrogen value chain. Rihla members further highlighted opportunities to work with partners such as the European Union and countries in South and Southeast Asia, which possess advanced technologies and established research ecosystems. Taken together, these reflections underscore that building a viable hydrogen sector requires careful sequencing, capacity building, and a realistic understanding of national and regional resource constraints. Hydrogen now sits at the center of many Gulf development strategies, but its real potential lies in its ability to anchor new industrial ecosystems, regional value chains, and cross-border partnerships. Our aim today is to bring together perspectives from emerging producers, key consumers, and institutional actors to identify where progress is happening, where cooperation is needed, and where gaps remain. The insights from this discussion will directly inform the work of Rihla's implementation phase. Earlier today, our closed-door roundtable offered a frank and substantive exchange about practitioners navigating these issues firsthand. It was short, but hopefully we can continue the discussions now. We now continue with our public program, beginning with a keynote speech from Tariq Ahmed of IRENA. His insights will help frame the broader landscape of hydrogen strategy, global demand, and the role of international partnerships in advancing this emerging sector. I'm very grateful to Tariq for joining us from Abu Dhabi, and I look forward to hearing his perspectives. Following the keynote, we will move directly into a panel discussion with a distinguished group of speakers from industry, policy, civil society, and regional development, including two members of Rihla's Gulf Committee, Mohammed Al-Breiki, who flew in from Doha, and Rumaita Al-Busaidi, who is leading much of the work behind the Oman Green Hydrogen Summit. I'm also very grateful to Adriana Abdel-Noor from the Global Fund for a New Economy and Al-Mukhtar Al-Saifi from Sohar Ports and Free Zone for joining us. Once again, let me thank the Majan Council for hosting us, and with that, I'll pass it back to David. Thank you.
Thank you again, Mehran. It's an intense pleasure to witness again the first Rihla initiative and to be part of this. And I'm speaking for the entire team of Majan Council for this. And that being said, so I probably already gave the opening idea of this panel. As already introduced, we'll now move to the keynote speech today, which is going to take a look at the perhaps rather global dimension of what we're actually looking at, and not to take away too many of the words of our wonderful speaker, of our keynote speaker today. One particular point that I would like to have today is perhaps the session today is less about finding out what hydrogen-based industrial development is, but rather let's ask the question, how can we make it happen, and which challenges do we need to overcome to make that happen? That being said, I'm very happy to announce Tariq Ahmed as the keynote speaker of today. Tariq is a graduate from the University of Nottingham, and over the course of his now nearly some 15-ish years of experience in high-level roles in this field, he has transitioned through almost the entire corpus of the international community, from the UNDP to the World Bank, eventually taking his place at IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Agency, and their office right next to us in Abu Dhabi, where he is the regional manager for the Middle East. And we're looking very forward to hearing his words on this. Tariq, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dawood. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. And thank you for the honor of addressing you today here in Muscat at Rihla Hydrogen Roundtable on the sideline of the Green Hydrogen Summit of Oman. And let me start with thanking Majan Council and Borsa and Bazaar Foundation for convening this important conversation. It is fitting that we meet under the banner of Rihla, a journey. Hydrogen is not the beginning of the energy transition, and it is not the end. It is the stage and journey we have already begun, moving from fossil-based energy system to one that is cleaner, more resilient, and more inclusive. So in the next few minutes, I would like to address three main things. First thing, I want to situate green hydrogen in the broader energy transition agenda. Second, to reflect on the unique leadership opportunity for the Gulf and the wider MENA region. And the third, I would like to outline practical policy and cooperation pathways, particularly between Gulf and the wider global South. So where hydrogen really sits in the energy transition now. Let me start with the big picture from our analysis. So renewables are expanding at unprecedented pace. In 2024 alone, the world added on the order of 580 gigawatts of new renewable power capacity, another world record year. Global renewables now stand roughly at 4.5 terawatts, yet still fall short from the global target by 2030, which is 11.2 terawatts. And that number of 11.2 terawatts came from the UAE consensus in COP28 when the global community and the world countries came and agreed that we need to triple the capacities from 2030 from 2023 as a baseline to 2030 to triple the capacities to reach 11.2 terawatts. So even with this rapid growth that I alluded a little bit earlier, the global power system alone can not deliver all the emission reductions we need. Analytical work of IRENA clear on this point. If we combine energy efficiency, direct electrification, and renewables, we can deliver only around 70% of the emission reductions needed for the 1.5 degrees pathway. Hydrogen and its derivatives are part of the solution for the remaining 30%, especially for industries like heavy industries, as well as transport, shipping, aviation, and long duration storage. In the 1.5 degrees scenario, the hydrogen could provide roughly 1/10 of the total mitigation needed by 2050, and around 12% of the final demand by mid-century. So hydrogen is not the main character in the transition story, but it is an indispensable supporting actor. However, the reality today looks very different. Global hydrogen demand is close to 100 million tons per year, mostly refining ammonia and methanol. And from this demand, only less than 1% of it is met by low emission hydrogen. Electrolyzer capacity has grown rapidly from 1.4 gigawatts in 2023 to several gigawatts more in 2024, but it remains far below what needed by 2030 and 2050 targets. So in other words, the direction is right, the scale is still far from where we need to be. So earlier, today in the closed meeting, I spoke about between the hype and delivery. In early 20s, we've seen everyone is speaking about green hydrogen. Everyone is mentioning that green hydrogen is the magical solution for the energy transition. Now, if we move from infrastructure to policies and projects, the picture becomes more nuanced. On the other hand, more than 50 countries in terms of policies have adopted hydrogen strategy or roadmaps, most of them aligned with net zero or climate neutrality target. On paper, hydrogen now fully part of the global transition narrative. However, the latest global hydrogen reviews shows that low emission hydrogen is not yet scaling at the pace implied by those policies. Demand is growing slowly and remains dominant by traditional uses. Less than 1 million tons of hydrogen today is produced as green or low hydrogen. Recent outlooks have even revised 2030 expectations downwards, not because technology has failed, but because policy uncertainty, of taker risk, grid bottlenecks, and higher financing costs. Financially, there is no shortage of interest. Globally, commitments to clean hydrogen projects to well over 100 billion US dollars, yet actual green hydrogen production is still measured in a few 100,000 tons per year, a very small fraction of total demand. This gap between ambition and implementation is precisely why a serious data-driven policymaking is needed. We have moved beyond the phase of hydrogen hype. The task now is not to do more hydrogen everywhere, but to deploy hydrogen selectively where it adds most value for decarbonization and development. I'll move to my second part of why the Gulf and the MENA matters. Again, it's the global backdrop. The Gulf and wider MENA region are not just participants, they are potential system shapers. Studies by IRENA and other organizations highlighted three structural advantages. The first, the region has some of the best solar and wind resources in the world, allowing very low cost renewable electricity, the primary input to competitive green hydrogen. Second, the region already has deep experience and infrastructure for exporting energy commodities from pipelines, ports, to trading houses, shipping, and finances. Third, the region sits at the crossroads of major demand centers in Europe, South Asia, and East Asia, making it naturally hub for future hydrogen and derivative trade flows. These advantages is not theoretical. We see them reflected in concrete strategies and projects. Oman, our host today, has one of the most ambitious national green hydrogen programs. Through Hydrom, Oman aims to become a major producer and exporter of green hydrogen and derivatives by 2030 and beyond. Multiple auction rounds have already been launched with large land areas dedicated to integrated renewable power, electrolyzers, hydrogen conversion, and export facilities. This is not a pilot. It is a new industrial pillar. In Saudi Arabia, the NEOM Green Hydrogen Project has reached financial close as one of the world's largest single green hydrogen and ammonia ventures, powered by gigawatt-scale renewables. Additional mega projects are under development in industrial hubs such as Yanbu. In the United Arab Emirates, the updated national hydrogen strategy sets target to reach more than 1 million tons per year of low carbon hydrogen by early 2030 and substantially more by mid-century, supported by dedicated industrial zones and export corridors. Taken together with initiatives in other Gulf countries as well, these efforts underline the region's potential to become major producer of low carbon hydrogen and hydrogen-based products. But this outcome is not automatic. The region also faces constraints such as limited hydrogen transport infrastructure, the need for large investment in ports, storage, and conversion facilities, and the challenge of designing markets and regulations that provide long-term certainty for investors and off-takers. The question is not whether the Gulf can play a leading role, but what kind of a leadership it will choose to exercise. My other part of the remarks, what recent analysis tells us about doing hydrogen right. Recent work by IRENA and partners offered several practical lessons. The first, that hydrogen strategies must be integrated. It should not be standalone. Hydrogen cannot be treated as a separate silo. It must align with national energy transition plan, industrial policy, climate commitment, and development strategies. That means focusing first on realistic domestic demand, replacing existing gray hydrogen in refineries and fertilizer plants, decarbonizing heavy industries, and piloting hydrogen-based fuels where alternatives are limited. The second lesson is that hydrogen should support development and just transition, especially in the global south. Joint work by Irina Unidu and research partners proposes a development-first approach, prioritize local value chain, anchor projects in industrial clusters, start with manageable projects rather than only mega projects, and face investments in line with falling costs and growing demand for regions like MENA with young population and diversification agendas. Hydrogen must be a tool for building new competitive industries and jobs, not just export commodity. The third lesson concerns infrastructure and standards. Quality infrastructure, by which we mean standard certification, testing, and measurement systems, is just as important as pipelines, ports, and electrolyzers. Markets will increasingly differentiate hydrogen and derivatives by their full life cycle emissions and by their environmental footprints, including the water use. Countries that invest early in robust certification schemes and mutually recognized guarantees of origin will enjoy advantage in future trade. Finally, recent outlooks stress that we must focus on no regrets use of hydrogen. Sectors where there are few other decarbonization options, and avoid locking in inefficient uses that could be served more simply by just direct electrification. The fifth part is about practical pathways for Gulf and Global South leadership. So now let me here offer 5 practical pathways for Gulf, working with partners across the Global South. First, anchor hydrogen in domestic decarbonization and green industrialization. Replacing existing gray hydrogen with green or low carbon hydrogen in refineries and fertilizer plants is a logical first step. Building on this, Gulf countries can pilot green steel, green ammonia, and e-fuels for shipping using their industrial zones and ports as living laboratories. This approach supports climate goals and creates skilled employments. Second, invest in no-regrets infrastructure, large-scale solar and wind, modern grids, flexible power systems, and efficient desalination will be valuable regardless of how quickly hydrogen scales. Hydrogen-specific infrastructure, such as common user port facilities, storage, and in some cases CO2 transport for blue hydrogen, should be planned regionally and in coordination with neighboring markets, not isolation. The third, de-risk investment with smart policies and climate finance, clear long-term targets, transparent regulations, and well-designed auctions can reduce risks, lower financing costs. Climate finance institutions, including the Green Climate Fund, the World Bank, and regional development banks can help de-risk early infrastructure and crowd in private capital, especially in lower income countries. Fourth, create demand and harmonize standards. Without credible long-term demand, project pipelines will remain fragile. Governments can set fast target for the use of low carbon hydrogen in specific sectors. Introduce performance-based standards for carbon intensity of key products and work through international platforms to harmonize certification system. This will give investors and off-takers confidence that market will exist for green products. Fifth and last point is build South-South value chain, not only North-South trade. The Gulf can connect its capital technology and project development experience with renewable resource potentials and industrial demand in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. And instead of exporting only molecules, we can jointly develop value chains, for example, producing green iron, green fertilizers, or sustainable fuels in partner countries with shared ownerships of value creation and technology. If we follow these pathways, green hydrogen can become a pillar of shared prosperity, resilience, and not another commodity. I thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tariq, for those for this both extensive and insightful overview. And I think I speak both for Mehran and me that one particular point I enjoyed having being highlighted in your presentation is the role of South collaboration, which is perhaps pretty much at the essence of both the Rihla and Panjan Council are standing for. The idea of imagining a world with new economic models and new platforms that don't necessarily need to include the global north, but where eventually the countries from the global south, and to that extent, the GCC is part of the global south, can focus on themselves and can build meaningful collaborations amongst one another and not just via countries of the global south. And I'm pretty sure that will also be one of the themes that our panelists are going to deal with, because now we're going to come to the next part of today's event, which is our panel. So we invited 4 people from different backgrounds, but all of them distinguished experts relating to hydrogen and the green economy, to be ready for us today to ask a couple of questions and to explore together with you, obviously, the question: how exactly can hydrogen-based industrial development look like, and which role do GCC investments play at it? Let me briefly give you an overview of the different participants that whom we have today. So first we have Al-Mukhtar Al-Saifi, who is an energy expert at Sohar Port and Free Zone. He's a mechanical engineer by background, graduated from Sultan Qaboos University. And he's eventually, so if you drive through Oman South, then you might spot a couple of wind turbines. Unfortunately, they're not enough yet. We hope they become more. However, Al-Mukhtar Al-Saifi is the person responsible behind making Oman's first wind park happening. And then he joined Sohar Port and Free Zone, Oman's largest industrial cluster, to explore both energy supply and sustainability questions. Al-Mukhtar Al-Saifi, please come to the stage. The second person in our group is Rumaitha Al-Busaidiya, who is, aside from being the Vice President of the Environmental Society of Oman, who is also the Business and ICV Development Manager at Hydrom. For those who are new to the country, Hydrom is Oman's one-stop shop when it comes to hydrogen issues across the countries. She is a graduate from both Harvard and Oxford, and I think it is not too much to say that Rumaitha, for many, especially with an international background, is sort of say the face of hydrogen in Oman. And so we're very happy to have her on the panel today. Rumaitha. Next, we have my dear friend and colleague, Mohammed Al-Breki. Mohammed Al-Breki holds a PhD from the Hamad bin Khalifa University in Qatar in Sustainability Studies after graduating with a Bachelor in Engineering from Washington State University. He's one of the few persons who combine being both a very successful academic and practitioner. in one person. So in his, you can't say private life, in his academic life, he is successfully publishing on renewable energy systems and their setups. And in his more industry or policy side of his life, he is the head of he's the head of industrial studies and policies at the Gulf Organization for Industrial Consulting, which is a rather broad, which is a rather long name, but the wonderful acronym GOIC stands for, it's an organization below the, it's an organization part of the General Secretariat of the Gulf Cooperation Council that deals with exactly the very question that our panel is also dealing with today. How exactly can we make new industries happen? And so I'm very, very glad and honored to have Mohammed Al-Breiki on the panel today. And as mentioned, South-South collaboration is a very dear topic to perhaps all of us here. And so our fourth panelist today is Adriana Ertal Abdenur, who is well, having too many titles to to bring into one single biography. She's the co-founder and executive director of Platforma SIPO, and for approximately a year now at the Global Fund for a New Economy, a global fund which analyzes also how the global South itself can become a more active player in deciding its own future. She holds a PhD in international relations from Princeton University. And so a fourth person on the panel today is an expert on international development, sustainability, and she will perhaps not just bring the perspective of another major global South player, Brazil particularly, into it. She used to be a special advisor for the presidency in Brazil, but she will also bring the perspective of economics and international development and perhaps the international community into this. Adriana, thank you so much, and please. So that being said, I would directly also start my first question to you, Adriana. Probably in my introductory words, in Tara's introductory words, we also already have heard quite a lot about hydrogen-based industrial development. But if you could perhaps for our audience, both online, so by the way, we're not just here in the room, we're also having dozens of people joining us online for a live stream of this workshop. Could you perhaps just break it down once again for us, based on your both academic experience, but also your experience in the very professional roles you have? Why is hydrogen-based industrial development so important?
Thank you very much for the question, but also thank you for the invitation to be here today and to learn so much from Oman, but also from the Gulf region. I'll speak from the experience of Brazil, which is my native country. Thank you. And there, the story of green hydrogen started, I think, driven in great part by European interest after the start of the energy crisis. And the way that green hydrogen was framed in Brazil for the first couple of years was very much in terms of export-oriented development. However, in Brazil, we have a long history. Should I change the microphone? Maybe there's some interference.
Feel free to go on.
Okay, thank you. In Brazil, we have a very long history and very intense debates over the decades about the space that we occupy within the global economic hierarchy, as traditionally, dating back to the colonial era, an exporter of primary commodities. And indeed, we're still a very important agricultural and minerals exporter, including oil and gas. But I would say that most Brazilians nowadays want to change this. And if we remain stuck on a purely extractive mindset when it comes to thinking about our transition, we will make again the mistakes of the past and render ourselves very vulnerable within a global context that brings great uncertainties, great turbulence. So, for instance, we depend heavily on external fertilizers for a pretty powerful agribusiness sector, 85% of our fertilizers. And when the conflict in Ukraine broke out, because our main source of imports for fertilizer, nitrogen specifically, was Russia, we found that one of the engines of our economy was in threat. So I would say that, first of all, the three main arguments for thinking green hydrogen in terms of industrial policy and not just export-oriented. The first one has to do with resilience and this desire to make ourselves less susceptible, whether to, peace and security challenges that arise elsewhere in the globe, but affects us also directly, or oscillation in prices, or having to subject ourselves to power dynamics within the global trade system. The second reason has to do with sustainable development. Now, Brazil has strong commitments and now has assumed a role of leadership within the climate regime. So mitigating its emissions is a very important priority for the current government, the third government of President Lula, my former boss. However, Brazil's understanding and its negotiating position, for instance, at climate COPs, has been that you have to combine development with climate. This is why we upheld the principle of the differentiated responsibilities, not as a shield to hide behind, but rather to say developing countries cannot afford and should not be expected only to mitigate, especially when richer countries are failing in their own commitments. Rather, we have to look at climate also as an opportunity to address our ecological crisis, but also our social challenges. And I come from a country that is deeply unequal. It's a very rich country. It has all the resources you could possibly imagine, but we still have poverty, inequality. We even have hunger that we need to get addressed. And therefore, thinking about industrial policy is a way to ensure that we're not just narrowly focusing on decarbonizing, but rather combining decarbonization of our economy with job generation, with income generation, with the ability to boost our social policies in ways that are aligned not only with our climate strategy, but also our SDG strategy. SDGs seem to be dying around the world. They're still very much alive in Brazil under Lula. And then I would say the third main argument has to do with technology, right? And it circles back to the first argument about resilience and ending the cycle of dependence. Where we are in the world, clearly, not just economic growth, but well-being, ecological responsibility, and competitiveness, they depend, maybe more than ever in the history of the world, on having access to affordable green technologies, but also being able to develop and co-develop green technologies. And the way that the trade, international intellectual property regimes, the way that the international financial architecture, and even the monetary system are set up, historically, they have restrained us from that access and development of technologies. And so thinking about industrial policy, the linkages between green hydrogen and our fertilizers, our steel, across the board, is a way for us to diversify our economy with quality, with sovereignty, and with a much more constructive approach to international cooperation than with what's currently being put on the table. So no lack of arguments. And I think from my few days in Oman, there is a lot of convergence with what I'm hearing from him. Thank you.
Thank you, Adriana, for this opening intervention, and particularly also the encouraging words that SDGs are not necessarily dead. We still have a lot to work on, and there is still a lot of work in progress that gives reason for hope. And let's perhaps now turn to an example of that. As I mentioned, so Sahar and Free Zone is the country's largest industrial cluster. It brings, which is, I'm not talking as an economist, the country's most important objective at the moment. It contributes 42,000 jobs to the national economy. And so we're eager to hear, given that Sahar is both, in a sense, both the host for rather traditional industries, but also for new ventures. When it comes to hydrogen-based industrial development, what's the state of play at the moment? So what's currently happening in Sahar, but also to obviously keep the very constructive element here alive, which challenges do you see at the moment when it comes to that?
Thank you, Dr. Dawood. And I would like to say thank you so much for your time, for joining us today. It's quite important for us to discuss this internally as an Oman, and also to see the experience and learn from the other countries. When it comes to Sahar, we see the trajectory of our growth for the past 20 years. We have been growing so fast. On the initial design of the port, by, let's say, 20 years ahead, we were supposed to grow by 50%, only to occupy 50% of the land of the port. Today, we are around 95%. So the port is almost full. 2,000 hectares is fully occupied by metal, by heavy industries like petrochemicals, by also logistics. We are expanding in the free zone. And now the free zone, the hectares is around 4,500. Phase 1 is almost gone. Phase 2 is 70% is fully occupied. We are growing so fast that we are pacing the international ports and free zone. We are growing now by the pace of almost 80% stagger, year on year. With that, it comes the challenge of consuming a lot of energy. And our main energy driver is gas for now. So we use gas, I stated previously, almost 30%, almost give or take, for electricity, and the gas, 60% of it goes to industry. We need hydrogen for a couple of reasons. The first one is to decarbonize our industries. Second one, we need to grow. And we see from the trajectory of the past 2 years, new investors are coming to Oman and coming to us. They want new products. And the products that we are trying to offer now is renewable energy and also green, for example, LNG, and also the green hydrogen. For now, we are consuming around 5.5 million square meter daily. That goes hydrogen to SMRs. And with that, we see the only potential that we can transition from gas is the hydrogen. But unfortunately, for now, there is no possibility that we can wait maybe, let's say, for 2030 or 2040 for a pipeline that will be coming from maybe a Duqm to us. That's why we decided to explore new areas. With that, we are now building a business case, investment case for a 100 megawatt electrolyzer that could be a yellow for a first stage, that we can take the, I would say, the electricity from the grid. Right now, the grid in Oman is around maybe 9 to 10% renewable energy, and we are expecting a 30% by 2030. So with that, we can claim this renewable energy in the upcoming years. We have signed an MOU, and we are working very closely with a Swiss company called Hynat. I mentioned this previously, to explore a white hydrogen. The Hynat, they have signed an MOU with the Ministry of Energy and Minerals. They have been given some areas within Oman to explore the possibility of white hydrogen, and that could unlock a new era of hydrogen within Oman. We talk about green hydrogen that can come maybe 2030. White hydrogen can come maybe very early, 28, 29, 28. And with that, the price also, we are expecting maybe the companies, they might be willing to change and pay what they are paying right now. For example, the gray hydrogen costs the companies something between 1.5 and maybe $2. The green hydrogen might be something between 3 to 4, and this is not feasible right now for our companies. But with white hydrogen and yellow hydrogen, the price could be reduced a lot. So this is what we are trying to do in the hydrogen space, alongside with everything else related to electrification, renewable energy, carbon capture, carbon capture might also unlock a new potential for us for blue product and blue hydrogen. So this is exactly what we are trying to achieve right now in Sohar port and Freedom.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mukhtar. So one particular issue that you didn't raise directly, but that I would like to raise, and that is also on the wonderful green wall behind me, is the term investment. So obviously things look very, very neatly on a piece of paper and sound really good in a house, but when it comes to implementation, well, money is is quite an obvious issue, and particularly in hydrogen. So if we look at particularly multinational energy project, the question who stems the financing, how is the financing being spent, is always a tremendous question. And so I would like to point my third question at Rumaita. I mean, obviously there's no need to say that Hydrom has been doing impeccable work when it comes to promoting Oman's standing in hydrogen worldwide. And so based on that, perhaps obviously part of the negotiations or engagement that you have with different people around the globe are also concerned with the role of financing here. So if perhaps both based on your work and based on a general perception of the sector, so to which extent is financing perhaps the missing link? Is it the missing issue when it comes to hydrogen-based industrial development? And in very, very practical terms, what can we do to finance these projects?
I don't know if it's a tough question or if it's a complex question or it's both. But maybe I could kind of guide back in terms of the role of Hydrom specifically. So we're mainly the custodian of the lands that we have, the 50,000 square kilometers of land. And the way that these lands are given is through the auction process. What a lot of people tend to forget or not really realize is how we award these projects. So Oman, within the beginning, and I think it was based on lessons learned in the LNG sector and oil and gas sector, that things that we didn't want to do again, and we needed to build the value chain and secure financing for these smaller projects as much as we can focus with the production, was in order for any of the developers that came in with $6 billion on average dollar project size. It's an integrated project. That's the way that Oman awards these hydrogen projects. So they start with the renewables, that hydrogen production, and then you need to kind of transform that hydrogen into value addition. So it could be ammonia, it could be steel, it could be methanol. It's the choice of the developer. And the way that, and then it's offtake as well. So that's offtake is on them. The government doesn't guarantee that offtake. And then one of the key questions that we knew very early on is if we were to kind of look at mega scale projects, we would secure financing because these are all major players in the sector globally. So that shouldn't be an issue. But our main question mark was, but what happens to the supply chain and the value chain as well? Because we don't have anything when it comes to hydrogen. So the way that these were kind of structured was, in addition to the main scope, you have an in-country value and domestic industry development assessment as well on the proposal that you bring into the table. And it's not a price contest. So people think auction is price, but it's technically a beauty contest. So whichever project that has the highest value for Oman is the one that actually wins the bid. And the highest value for Oman are these two criteria. So what are you doing in terms of employment, domestic sourcing, R&D? That's what we call in-country value. And then what are you doing outside of your scope, which is the four things that I mentioned, to onshore the supply chain? So what are you doing? Are you doing something when it comes to bringing in solar panels? Are you trying to do something when it comes to wind blades? Anything downstream when it comes to e-fuels? In order for us to ensure that at least a stake of those big projects or those big players are also securing some sort of other financing that is coming in to those projects. So that is one element that we were trying really hard to kind of ensure that that is captured. The other aspect that we're working on are two things. One is what we call a double-sided auction. And this is basically to really bring in financing in-house in the country. So this auction is very well known globally that it happens across borders. So Germany, for instance, has a very notorious known double-sided auction called H2 Global, and that is in partnership with other countries. So both countries put in money into the pot, and then they bridge the gap between the price of the supply and the demand. What we wanted to do was, that's a beautiful model, but I want to do it in Oman. I'm not opening it up for other countries to kind of come in. I want to enhance and increase the local demand here in Oman and create the market for green hydrogen. So now we're in the process of, is it only steel? Are we vector agnostic? Are we opening it up to all other sectors? That's still something that we're trying to figure out. And another thing that is really important as well is we know that financing is an issue specifically when it comes to local demand. And something that we're trying really hard to convince the government is that there is a delta that someone needs to bring in. How that is going to be financed is a discussion that we still haven't yet reached because we still don't know what the delta is. And the last thing is more looking at startups and really attracting those technologies from abroad to Oman and then have that knowledge transfer. So there's a pilot scheme that we're working on launching next year. And that is really looking at startups that are and technologies that are in technology readiness level of 4 or 5, and what can we do to kind of push them up the ladder, and then maybe have Oman as the way that they can and mechanism to kind of go there. And when it comes to financing, that's where we've been having a lot of discussions with different funds and different financing mechanisms, green financing as well, to see if this actually can warrant some of these projects getting that financing as well. So it's like different moving parts, but that has been a big question mark this year specifically on finance and how do we get these projects to reach FID and encourage offtake, because it's always a question of offtake. I don't have control of what's happening outside of Oman. So the best that I could do is kind of build that in country and see as much as I can to kind of bridge that.
Thank you so much, Romeva. And I want to stick with two things you mentioned. So on the one hand, exactly, we can't, we only have obviously very little control over which offtake eventually appears. So let's today perhaps focus about what we can actually do. And secondly, you strongly mentioned the role of integrated supply chains, and that is also the main topic that I would directly like to point at the Breki. I would like to ask two questions. On the one hand, again, Romeva already mentioned the role of integrating supply chains in this. So thinking also about the Moroccan experience, for instance, which is quite relevant also when we talk about quick industrial development. Industrial ecosystems is a very big keyword. So the idea to, instead of creating singular items in supply chains, to rather say, let's create entire ecosystems, perhaps even geographically concentrated in clusters. How important do you think that is for hydrogen-based industrial development? And the second question, we now focus very much in Oman, but another external development to Oman is obviously Oman's direct neighborhood. So my question to you is, which role does the GCC have when it comes to developing hydrogen-based industries in Oman?
Sure. Thank you very much. Well, I will answer these two questions for sure. But before answering these two questions, no, not a story. I wish I have a story, but before answering these two questions, I really want to emphasize on one thing, because I've heard it multiple times. So now and in the future, hydrogen is a must. We need it within our economy or within our industries. I'd say, like, literally, I was talking with a lot of people. Like 4 years back, hydrogen was something nice to have, and it's for the environment. Okay, this is literally the talk 4 years back. Now, with the demand with basically an increase of AI and data centers, we need energy. We need energy, and we don't have energy. Our energy is not enough. So now, producing more power, and then from power, hydrogen or other derivatives is needed. So I really want to see and this is my dream, like literally 7 years back, I want to see the first nuclear reactor to produce, I think it's pink hydrogen. Yeah, it's pink hydrogen in Oman. Is it pink? I really want to see this. This is going to be like, this is my dream. Yeah, and then I'll sure. But that's one. Now I will answer the questions about Dr. Daud. So first is about the integration. Currently, I'm working in GOIC, which is Gulf Organization for Industrial Consulting, and I'll give you an example. Then I'll tell you what hydrogen role. So in the past, what we used to offer is that we do investment opportunity for specific country. So for example, Oman, there is a high potential to produce aluminum. So let's do the investment opportunity in Oman. Now we changed this. We are looking for joint investment opportunity. We're not looking for one country, investment opportunity for one country. We're looking for investment opportunities for 2 GCC country and more. And I'll be very honest with you, producing electrolyzer is one of these investment opportunities. So we want to produce electrolyzer within the GCC. So, for example, a specific raw material will come from a specific country, and the factory will be in another country, and the R&D center, for example, will be in another country. And those 3 countries will work together to produce this specific product. So yes, it's very important, and we see the future of it. And there are so many initiatives currently been discussed with the leaders, with the GCC leaders, to have this. Actually, we have we have 4 priorities. We want food security, we want pharmaceutical security, we want energy security, and under energy falls 2 things. Falls basically, hydrogen and and its derivatives, plus supply chain of the electricity and the network. And third one is for water, because we depend a lot on desalination. So we also looking at membranes, yes, production of membranes, because all of our membranes are imported from outside. So yes, it's very important. Now I'll answer the last question. But wait, so it's not about the supply chain. It's about the supply chain. Yes, it's very critical role. To be honest, we have evaluated the strength and weakness in every GCC countries. Some of the GCC countries, they have abundant, for example, gas. Some of the GCC countries, they have space. Some of the GCC countries have raw material. So what we've done is that we've collected all of this information, and from this we made this as a baseline, and from there we started to link the dots. And this is actually an ongoing project, and it's going to finish very soon, and we will publish it to see more projects where more than 2 GCC countries will collaborate. And I want to conclude my talk with Central Asia country. I know that lately Oman opened like a corridor with the Netherlands. After His Majesty Sultan Haytham visited the Netherlands, they signed an agreement to basically, Oman will produce liquefied hydrogen, and then they will export it directly to the Netherlands. So why not? Because currently in Oman, investment in Central Asia is not a lot, and we know that, for example, Masdar, Aqua Power are investing in Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan and other Central Asia countries. So why don't we have a corridor from Oman to Central Asia, where we supply them with the needed, for example, green hydrogen? And yeah, that's my speech.
Just a statement here. If the moment we see pink hydrogen in Oman, that means green hydrogen are all made redundant because the cost would make a big difference. So you're killing one industry over the other. Just a note.
Thank you, Mohammed, for this important and broad statement. And I would like to stay at the topic of regional cooperation for a while. Perhaps as a pretext, I just thought for a while now during the last statements about this very lengthy and somewhat hard to tackle term hydrogen-based industrial development, which seems too artificial in a sense. It does eventually, if you dissect the term, contain two completely independent things. On the one hand, we have the hydrogen development itself, so we have hydrogen as a fuel, so to say, and then we have industrial development as an complex. And both of these things individually can be quite challenging. And so the question I'm now asking is perhaps rather concerning the second part of this, the industrial development part, perhaps as a pretext over the past years. Within the GCC, we have seen in many areas of new economic sectors, despite what Dr. Mohammed has mentioned, although we actually see so much potential for collaboration, in practice we often see competition being more being rather the state of the rules of the game, and this has in case of many industries, hampered their development, and obviously it is also an inherent threat to hydrogen-based industrial development. To someone who is, as you mentioned, perhaps not that closely familiar with whose main focus hasn't been the Gulf region so far, speaking perhaps out of the experience of Latin America, also from a global point of view, what do you think are actual feasible factors that can drive regional collaboration instead of regional competition? How can we reach regional collaboration?
Thank you, Dawood. That's a great question. Here's my shot at answering it based on the Latin American experience. First of all, when I come to this region, I think Brazilians and South Americans especially come to this region. We have a lot to learn about regional organizations from you. However, many gaps there may remain and challenges. You are way ahead of us. The regional mechanisms in Latin America or South America, right? We use those regional parameters differently depending on the context. They have disintegrated due in part to political polarization. So we don't have platforms that you have managed to keep relatively depoliticized or to survive all of the geopolitical turbulence in this region. However, there is an incipient discussion in Latin America about the need to create a new basis for regional cooperation and maybe even integration on new grounds. And renewable energy is one of the main pillars of this conversation. When it comes to competition versus cooperation, I think there is a middle term, which is complementarity. And I'm not referring here to the sort of orthodox economics, what resources do you have, we don't have, but rather, so not like a zero-sum game, but to really look at where we have more expertise, more capacity, to share that capacity but to act jointly so that we're not doing, protectionism against each other blindly, but forging a collective bonds in face of a very challenging context. So let me give you an example. When it comes to norms and standards and certification, which obviously have a strong technical scientific component, but these are also based on highly political discussions. And we no longer want to be takers of Western norms. We want to actively partner to shape norms with external actors. It's very hard for any single country, whether it's Oman or whether it's Brazil, to do this by themselves. But if we have a regional consultation, I think we can enter that particular conversation much more strongly. On other areas, when we look at infrastructure, we look more territorially and we say, okay, there is like energy infrastructure close to our international borders. There, let's come up with agreements, whether bilateral, trilateral, or even multilateral within a regional scope, so that we can think of supply chains not only within our individual countries, because in Brazil too, we're thinking about, creation of demand, but there are things where, it would be very beneficial to be able to work across the border more with, with Paraguay, with Bolivia, with Argentina, politically very challenging right now, with Colombia. And so it's a case-by-case basis, but the fact that you have these regional spaces here where you've managed to, over time, I know with great difficulty, still talk to each other, to us, we have a lot to learn. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I just want to add, this is my personal opinion. I would prefer the competition to be as it is. It's very nice. It's very nice to have, it's very nice to have someone who is trying to be better, trying to compete. So it's very healthy. However, I will also agree is like keep the competitions ongoing, but add with it these, extra framework where you try to link them together later on. But keep them compete, keep them, try to keep them work, keep them get all these, import these good technologies and produce these, good products with a good quality. However, once they're there, try to link them with other nations.
So I think competition is necessary anywhere because, personally for me, if I want to push any policy in Oman, I just use neighboring countries and what they've done. And it's very easy to push things because you have that sibling rivalry, right? I don't want this one, I'll do better. So competition by any chance is there. But I would say specifically in the hydrogen space, there's a lot of more complementarity that is needed than competition. Specifically, if we're talking, whether we're talking about creating local demand, being able to kind of supply. We're seeing that example specifically in the power sector where Kuwait sometimes has shortages and we send power. There's a lot of room that we learn a lot from that collaboration. That could potentially be something we could do with hydrogen as well. But also, I think there's a room to really come together to really lobby for Middle East produced hydrogen or Arabian Peninsula or GCC produced hydrogen to other export markets, specifically like, for instance, the EU and how we're able to kind of bridge those gaps. I think with complementarity, we can get more and maximize the pie for everyone. Because what is needed, even, Irina mentioned it very well, the need by 2030 surpasses the capacity of anyone in the GCC to actually produce. So by default, you're not necessarily competing for the same market, you're actually providing a mass. So if you collect it as a mass collector, that will work. How that framework works, because I personally have been witness in the past few years, different mechanisms that haven't really worked yet to bring that collectively. And I think it's because every country is in a different level of where they are. Oman is probably the most advanced when it comes to a whole national strategy, coming in together and really focusing on that, while the other countries are doing it more on a company level, individual level, rather than a national level in terms of spearheading a lot of the initiatives as well. But there's a lot of room that we can learn from each other, but also use some best case studies from each other to actually advancement.
Thank you so much. Just, on a note of sustainability and also competition. So 2 years back, the sustainability function was created within the port and the free zone. So previously, we used to do things the traditional way. But the sustainability, when it's created, we managed to assess all the ports and industrial areas around us. And the funny thing that we found, almost 71 industrial areas and ports, they are almost copy and paste. They have metal, they have petrochemicals, and they have logistic. With our sustainability of being I mean, to secure energy and also looking for alternative solutions, we need a sustainability to also sustain our growth. With that, we decided to go also with the clean tech manufacturing, and we go with, I mean, the PV panels, and we are also exploring some parts of wind turbines and also membranes and the rest of the thing.
Musta, thank you. Feel free to keep the microphone. I'm having perhaps a rather tough question now. So because your co-panelists, I mean, to me, this boils down to two important terms that we have. One is complementarity, and the other one is connectivity. So these two, I mean, even though connectivity wasn't it's a term, but these are kind of the two important things we talk about. Perhaps let's use Sahar as an open case study for this. I mean, Sahar is Oman's largest industrial cluster again, but it's not the only cluster in the country, and by far from even the closer neighborhood. Absolutely. There's a Duqm in Oman, Fujairah is pretty close. Jebel Ali is obviously the large, the large neighbor, so to say. So when it comes to hydrogen-based industrial development, or if you also to keep industrial development in a broader sense, what exactly would be the complementarity angle that Sahar brings into that? And how exactly could meaningful and beneficial connectivity between those different industrial zones look like?
It's a very tough question. Yeah. But I think, I mean, one of the key advantages that we have in Sahar is we have an area, we have land, we have sufficient amount of land, we have an accessibility, and we are connected from north to south to energy, so we can get an energy cheaper, I would say, from the rest of Oman. And also the complementarity element is that we are also connected to the GCC when it comes to our networks, to the grid. So we can also export and import renewable energy from the GCC. And the other element that also we have a skilled, I would say, task force within the port and the free zone. We can do things the right way, and we can accelerate whatever we can get. And also with that, we are now trying to search for what is that competitive advantage. And we see the competitive advantage that we have the right setup, especially in the free zone, that we can bring investors, that they can also contribute within the industry of the hydrogen. And also with that, we have the luxury to climb the ladder of going step by step toward the clean hydrogen. So gray first, then yellow, white, blue, and then green.
Thank you. I mean, I find this question particularly intriguing from the point that, I mean, thinking back of the very, very first lecture on international trade I ever had, and you will probably look at wonderful linear supply and demand functions, then you will very quickly come to the result that free trade is always beneficial. And also in this case, you would argue free trade and having more connectivity is definitely going to help us. Well, then, if we look into more heterodox version of development is actually happening, then obviously we do know the economies of scale are something that is quite important. Building integrated ecosystems that are actually able to support one another are quite is something quite tough. So how do we find the right balance even within the region? How do we find the right balance between we protect the industrial zones so they can, or national industrial zones, so they can actually get strong enough to build the economies of scale that you need in hydrogen-related industrial sectors? And to which extent do we just say, well, the connectivity is not going to hurt us, it's going to open new avenues? So how do we balance between these two things? I don't know if anyone, I leave the question open if anyone would like to reply to that.
Well, I mean, I'm going to give a case, but not for hydrogen, for aluminium. I just want to answer the question when it comes to connectivity and integration. So, correct me if I'm wrong. Sahar aluminium is within Sahar port, within Madain, right? It's not within the port. Okay. So Sahar aluminum produce three products: aluminum liquid, which is basically go back directly, it's used locally, and aluminum billets and rods. So these billets and rods are not, are basically exported outside, or they are, for example, sent to another, another industrial zone within the GCC, because they have a factory that will convert that billets to, for example, these another finished product. So I would recommend, when it comes to, for example, to hydrogen, is that to know what are the strengths in every GCC country, and based on these, which, if, for example, if there is some strong points in Oman, Oman should focus on these strong points. Other GCC countries should focus on other strong points. So Oman will be an input, and their outputs will be used in other GCC countries. And honestly, we started this currently, and we want to test it. So we are planning, we collected all the decision makers within the GCC, and we tell them that we have this proposal. Country X will have, from this value chain, A, B, and C. Country B will have C, D, and Y, and X, and go on. And we received very positive feedback. Everyone was interested and was willing to be part of this. So we will see. We are testing this, and hopefully it might be a successful approach, a successful case. Because, to be honest, comparing when we looked at the GCC as an entity and we compare it with other entities around the world, GCC in a higher levels when it comes to collaboration. And yeah.
Thank you so much. This is a very important vision from our perspective. I mean, I remember even over lunch we briefly discussed that we often perceive finance and economics to be this singular perspectives, but in a sense, they are connected to so many, to actually everything else in the end. And eventually, even if you now take the European Union as an example, so one core mechanisms of the also political stability within the European Union are distributed supply and value chains. It is the fact that supply chains are distributed across the continent, which makes this union so strong. And so looking into a future in which supply chains might be spread across the GCC is a very, very, I would say, desirable future. That being said, let me open the floor briefly for one or two or maybe three questions. Who would like to ask any question to our panelists? Yes.
Thank you for this very incisive panel. I enjoyed the discussions. I would like just to add a component which is also a cornerstone for the green hydrogen value chain, which is the capacity building, scaling up and capacity building, because we need people qualified to build those joint projects across GCC, but across also the Middle East and North Africa. Just the role of Irazen is to bridge between academia and industry, to support applied research and innovation, to raise the technology readiness level of research projects, maybe to arrive to create spin-offs, startups, and also we will pre-industrial platforms with the key partners to have the funding, and we hope to continue partnering. We partner with Europe, with Germany, and we want to have partners in across the Arab region. I prefer to say Arab region than MENA region, and with the GCC, inshallah.
Thank you so much. Let's perhaps collect another one or two questions. Okay.
Yeah, I can project. So on the topic of hydrogen-based green industrial development, it helps to have hydrogen, right? To be able to achieve this goal. The issue we have in the region is that all hydrogen, as you pointed out in the introduction, is mostly export led. I'm sorry, in the keynote speech by my colleague.
I said the same.
You said the same. I wasn't paying attention. The other issue of who has an industrial policy is the other arm to this. So considering these two components, mostly export-led hydrogen production, but capacity nonetheless in a number of countries, and quite a heterogeneous state across the region in terms of who has an industrial policy. Of the panelists, of all four of the panelists, who do you think the region has as the front runner that can achieve this? If there's one or two countries that perhaps we could push, who do you think that should be?
Thank you so much, Karim. Do you have a third question? Yes, one third question over there.
As the name Germany just came up, I come from actually an applied research organization, exactly what you just pointed out. So I think what is needed also here in Oman as well as in other countries, it's good to have also a model like we have in Germany that is going to be implemented here to have this, to fill the gap between academia, which we have excellent academia here in Oman. I know so many universities, you have excellent industry, and to fill this patch. So this is very important. And I just want to say a word about the standardization, because I tend to happen to be a convener of a standardization group for many years. And it's not like the Western put in standards to the rest of the world. Each country, even in Europe, are eligible to create their own standards, even here in Oman. I just came back from South Africa. They also have a standardization body. They do the standardization. So all countries can and should create their own standards, even here in Oman, because it is very important for creating national and local value. And so from my side, working there for 3 years as the convener to get 15 European countries, imagine with their own individual standard, to harmonize a standard in European level, it is not an easy task because they have their individual thinking. And that's also what could happen here in Oman to start. I don't know, do you have a standardization body? I'm not sure, I'm new. So if you have a standardization body, yeah. So I could only encourage also Oman, because this is the first important step for creating domestic value. This is very, very important. I worked in Malaysia for more than 10 years, and with the same question, to create local value. Yeah, you can have additional support by exteriors, but then at the end of the line, it has to be workforce within the country. Just wanted to say that because it's not that the West put in standards from you could do that by yourself.
Thank you so much. I'll probably have this question, probably just go in the order of seating, or the order of the original talk. If you could try to keep your answers short, to 1 to 2 minutes max, that would be lovely. Start.
Thank you. I agree. Each country has the ability and should work on its own standards. Having said that, I worked on this in Brazil, and I can tell you that there are actors who come in and they try to not impose, but offer their own as templates. And there are sometimes political, commercial, and even geopolitical interests behind it. And I think, that in Brazil, we classify biofuels as sustainable. In other places, not so much. So we have to discuss the interoperability, but it's a question of national sovereignty with respectful international cooperation. The taxonomy is something that I've been mentioning here a lot, because in Brazil, we're developing the taxonomy. We have a general taxonomy. Now we're starting to develop the green hydrogen taxonomy, and it's a very important instrument for investments. Our National Development Bank, which is, I think, generally a very positive example of how to use public resources to crowd in private sector capital with quality, now uses that taxonomy in all of its investments across the board. And that helps to ensure that our priorities, whether social, environmental, or economic, are reflected in those, especially early stage capital, to get rid of the bottlenecks early on in new types of, new classes of investments. Thank you.
Dr. Orion.
Well, so two questions. When it comes to which country is best, I'm not gonna answer this question. Yeah. Well, it's because I'm working for the GCC countries, and it's not easy to pick one. So I think
Say the first and the
I'll-
last letter.
yeah, I'll leave it for Meta and I'll let them to answer this question. But regarding standardizations, yes, in Oman we do have a standardization body. Plus, within the GCC we also have a standardization body. However, I agree with my colleague. We usually get best of practices from Western countries. So they will come, they will present their standards, and they will not present it in a, I'd say, in a non-biased way. Yeah. So that's the reason.
I would say the lobbying pressure goes way beyond us being strong, to be honest. And a very simple example is how we've designed our green hydrogen projects and auctions was because every single developer insisted that it needed to be RFNBO compliant from day one. If it wasn't for that, we would have designed it completely different. So while I'm cognizant of the fact that Oman, in fact, is amongst the signatory countries in COP28 for mutual recognition of certifications in green hydrogen projects and molecules, but that I can tell you right now won't be accepted, that you need to do pre-certifications and certifications and everything to certify by European players and Asian players that this meets their criteria as well. So even though we're working really hard and we have sort of standards that exist already for gray hydrogen, which covers a lot of the similar things when it comes to how to handle it, safety and the likes, you're still required to show that you actually align with what the Western or global norm wants. When it comes to countries, I'm not sure, Karim, if you actually meant the GCC or all, so I would say across the world, at least in MENA region. For MENA region, maybe I would say the example that we want to look out to, and it will be a case study for all of us, is Saudi, with how NEOM is going to come up. It's expected to be operational next year. So all eyes is on NEOM at the moment to see what happens there, what we could do. Something that we really learned outside of the MENA region on things not to do, to be honest. And I think I've spoken to my colleague in South Korea, is things that we learn a lot from is South Korea, because they have a lot of mobility, they have a lot of things, and their incidents are quite public. So, and they don't shy away from saying, this is what we have done to reprimand or fix things. There has been a lot of case studies of understanding what you should not do, or what are key things that you can avoid similar circumstances as well. Those are my.
Thank you so much, Mehmet.
Just, a final note on the capability for building. You are so right in Sohar Port and Free Zone. We have an experience with Port of Rotterdam, because they are our partners. They have built something called Distro Lab, where they gather all the smart people, the smart entrepreneurs with all these crazy ideas. They host them, they support them, and they try to get the best out of the ideas they can be implemented within the port and the Free Zone. We are designing the same exactly. We have Sohar Lab, where we have the first stage, we have few crazy, bright ideas. We have smart people, students from all over Oman, from maybe it could be a student in maybe the schools or the universities, colleges, and also with SMEs. So by 2026, we are going to launch this Sohar Lab, where we can get these talents and we try to support them, and we try to find out what are the challenges that can be solved using some of these talents and ideas. Thank you so much.
Thank you. With that, I would like to close the panel with one final round, and I would like to ask each one of you to only answer one sentence. I mean one sentence. Otherwise, Amar's gonna come and take the microphone away. So in one single, probably. So in one single sentence, what do we need to do, be it here in Oman or be it on a global basis? What do we need to do to make hydrogen-based green industrial development a reality? Starting perhaps with you, Mukhtar.
I would say maybe two words: collaboration, integration, and this is exactly what we are trying to do in Oman.
Continue the dialogue.
Thank you, Ramita.
I'm still thinking.
It was a sentence, I'm sorry.
Internal coordination, external cooperation.
Connectivity, real use cases.
Thank you so much. So first, please extend an applause to wonderful panelists. Before everyone storms out, I would like to express my very sincere thanks first to our co-organizers today from Bourse and Bazaar Foundation, Mehran and his team from Bourse and Bazaar and the Rihla initiative. Thank you for this wonderful partnership. Then second, obviously, to my own local team, Mahmoud, who is the face behind the organization here, and his wonderful colleague, Amr, whom you've seen well, actually, the positively not seen because they make everything happen in the background while you don't even notice it, as well as a wonderful live stream team and the team of the hotel. Thanks to all of you for making this possible. And thanks to you for attending. Obviously, this panel is rather the starting point of a prolonged discussion and joint journey of all of us than the end. And I, from our side, I'm excited to see where this journey leads. Thank you. Should we perhaps take a group picture in front of the